7 years, 10 court appearances, $50,000, and triple bypass heart surgery. That was author David Eadie's miserable ordeal getting his parents' estate settled when they passed. Now he's on a mission to help others avoid the same fate. In this episode, we'll hear his 3 steps to help build an estate plan and get your affairs in order. You're watching Inside Investing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Brian Rogers. Joining us is David Eadie, author of Executor Help: How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights. David, it's great to have you here with us. Thanks for taking the time to tackle such a difficult topic for many Canadians to discuss.
Well, first off, Brian, thanks for having me. Yes, it is a topic that most Canadians, I'd say a majority of Canadians, don't want to have. I'm going to go out on a limb. Actually, I'm pretty sure that this is the least sexiest topic that you're ever going to have to talk about, because nobody wants to talk about this area. When people talk about it, it makes them uncomfortable. They get awkward, and it's a tough thing to do. But it's a conversations, and the work has to be done so that you keep the family together.
Yeah, and I know you and I had talked that most people we know have stories that are related to this, and as you get on in age as well, I know as myself, I've had experiences with this type of thing, and so I'm sure there's a lot of people in our audience that are in the same situation. That being said, you were inspired to write your book after the tough time that you had with your siblings, and in terms of settling your parents' estate. Can you share that story with us a little bit? What's your experience there?
Well, I'll give you the short story because there's a lot to it. It took me 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000 to settle my parents' estate, and they had a will. And during that 9th time, I ended up, because of the stress of what I was going through, I ended up having triple open heart bypass surgery. It was during one of the days I was driving to court with one of my siblings, because there was 2 sides to this, the court case. And I said, I think there's a book in me, and I wanted to write about it. And then there was another time we were sitting in court, and I thought I was having sort of an out-of-body experience whereby I'm saying my parents have to be turning over in their graves, because here we had a judge and we had lawyers fighting over their estate. We ended up coming to a decision, but during that time when I was going through it, every time that I would talk about what I was going through, whether it would be with clients or with friends, I'd hear about one more story about a family that wasn't talking, or I'd hear about a story about an executor that was having problems with beneficiaries. So I didn't want people to go through what I went through, so I decided to write the book during the time that we all had during COVID.
All right, yeah, I can definitely put a strain on relationships for sure. I'm really interested in hearing a bit more about that, but I'm also looking forward to hearing how to get an estate plan in order to help avoid problems down the line. But first, I have a trivia question for the audience. What percentage of Canadians have an estate plan, according to a study by IG Wealth Management in 2023? We'll reveal the answer at the end of our conversation, so stay tuned. All right, just one quick note for our viewers before we get into our conversation. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, TD Direct Investing, so you don't miss an episode of Inside Investing. Make sure to let us know in the comments what you think about today's episode and what else you'd like to cover on the show. With that said, let's get into it. All right, David, first off, why do you think more Canadians don't prepare an estate plan?
Well, comes down to probably 3 things. They want to avoid it because, again, it's not a subject that anybody really wants to talk about. They're, dying or leaving their loved ones behind. But spoiler alert, it's going to happen to all of us. So if they decide that, take the view that they're going to avoid, they'll probably either not do anything or they'll procrastinate. They'll put it off. They'll put it off into the future. Oh, I'll get to that. Oh, I'll get to it. Or some people take the view, well, you know what? I'm dead. What will it matter? And they don't do anything. But here's the problem. Over the next 10 years, we're about to see about $1 trillion of wealth transfer going from generation to the next generation. And the other big problem is families aren't prepared. They're not ready for that wealth transfer. And a lot of people might be sitting there and saying, you know what? who is this guy? He's a bit of a moron. What is he talking about? He doesn't know my family. We get together at holiday time and we tell jokes and everybody gets along. Everybody has a good time. He has no idea about my family. Don't kid yourself. You have absolutely no idea how your family's going to react when you're no longer there. You don't know how they're going to treat your executor. And you really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. Believe me, I know. Then there's the family that's going to say, okay, yeah, there's a will, but I'm not going to let anybody know about it. I'm not even going to tell who the executor is going to be. And they let the paperwork do the talking when they're gone. Or there's a family that's going to decide and say, you know what, this is just another part of life. And we want to make sure that we're passing on to the next generation our not only our values, but also our wealth. And so that the family is going to stay together. So you need to have those great conversations to get started. At the end, and I'm probably going to say it a bunch of times here, you want to leave a legacy, not a legacy and a mess.
I like that. Yeah, you don't want to leave a mess for sure. And I hear what you're saying in terms of the procrastination. And I don't think people many times realize that importance. I've even talked about a lot of people, and I was one of them for quite a while that was, oh, I have beneficiaries on my investments and I have these other things all set up. Yeah, what's the worst that can happen? But so that gets me to my next question. So the government will ultimately help settle an estate. I think a lot of us realize that if someone passes without a will. So why is it important to have an estate plan in your view? What are these kind of bad things that can happen?
You've got a choice. You can create your own estate plan, or if you don't have an estate plan, the government has one for you. So you can only imagine how well that's going to go. I have a friend, Denise. Her mother passed away when she was very young, and at the age of 9, her dad passed away. So here she was with no parents, and she distinctly remembers in the parking lot of the funeral home, one aunt taking her and the other aunt taking her brother. And what she remembers is that despite her having a good childhood, she remembers that anytime that she needed, her aunt needed money for school supplies or extracurricular activities, she always had to go petition the court. And she didn't want this to happen to her family. So she started to make the decisions to make sure that she had an estate plan in place to get things organized. It reminds me recently, one of the contributors to the book, she called me up about 2 weeks ago and she told me that she had just been named an executor of one of her best friends. She didn't know she was executor. She got the call from the lawyer. But what she found out was that her friend had another best friend and they had grew up together, through middle school, and they become really good friends. But 5 years ago, the relationship became fractured and they no longer spoke to each other. But before that, the individual, the testator, had named that individual, that other best friend, and left her over $2 million. Now, they are no longer spoke anymore. Will isn't updated. This individual has passed away, but this woman that she had didn't want to have anything more to do with this woman, has now left her $2 million. You need to update your estate plan so that your wishes are going to be carried out and you make it clear to the executor exactly what your wishes are to be and how to make it clear for the beneficiaries. Again, you don't want to leave a legacy and a mess.
The relationships, I think a lot of people forget about that. It can definitely be a relationship killer if even amongst your own family, which sounds like you've experienced, and that was a good example as well. But can you tell us, what does an executor mean, or what does that mean? What do they do? And who are the other people that might be involved in this process?
Well, I'd say the executor is the key person when it comes to settling the estate. They're actually the quarterback. So basically the three main goals that your quarterback, your executor, that what you want them to do is that you want to make sure that you pay the right amount of taxes, to make sure that you, make sure that the government accepts what's being done, that you get the clearance certificate from CRA. And then the third thing is that you pay the beneficiaries in a timely manner. So within, for the quarterback, they're going to need some team players. So the testator, who we'll say is the general manager, because that's their team. The quarterback, you need to surround them with the best players, or the players that's going to help the quarterback get the job done. So you would want to make sure that there's a lawyer that they can reference, get in touch with. that there's an accountant that's going to help them do the tax planning or settling, doing the tax return. You're also going to need a financial advisor who's going to help manage the assets and also disperse them to the beneficiaries. Then after that, you probably would need a real estate agent. You might need an auctioneer, someone who's also going to settle the estate. You're going to need someone who's going to, maybe have to clean out the house. So some people might, get a family member or a friend to be the executor, which is usually the norm, or they might choose a bank or a trust company. And it's going to come with two, the pros and cons. But you have to weigh which makes the most sense, and don't make it only just about the cost of what it's going to cost the estate. How's it going to keep family harmony? How are you going to keep the family together? And if you go with the bank or the trust company, then they've got their processes and they're going to help you all the way along. If you decide the other way, then you're going to make sure that you prepare the executor as best you can.
All right. No, thanks for giving us that picture. I like the football analogy. Kind of really helps paint that picture of those key players like the lawyer and the accountant. And, my terrible joke attempt is it looks like, you need that team to tackle the estate, right?
Like that was good. That's well played, Brian. Well played. Okay. I like it.
I thought you'd like that, David. All right. So moving on to the idea of timing. So when I say timing, I mean, in terms of creating your estate plan, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I'm young. I don't need an estate. I don't really have kids yet. Or, I just bought a house a few years ago. I got lots of time for my estate. What do you think in terms of a time frame? What's an appropriate age for someone to start seriously considering their estate plan?
There's no appropriate time because nobody knows when that alarm clock, your life, is going to go off. So don't take for granted that, I can do this in the future. You have absolutely no idea when that day might come, when an unexpected emergency might come. It doesn't have to be a death. It could be a disability. It could be a sickness or an illness that's going to affect the family going forward. And you need to have the proper documentation and have the conversations with the people that you care about to make sure that they're able to continue on. Especially take it one step further. Suppose you own a business and if there's a death or there's a disability, what's going to happen to the business? You've got three things can happen. You're either going to sell it, either going to pass it on to a relative or a friend, or you're going to shut it down. And if you haven't got in a succession plan along with your estate plan, then the business, which could be the livelihood, the big breadwinner for the family, could seriously jeopardize the health and wealth of the family going forward.
I think, it's all part of life. Like you said, it's part of you have to do it. But hopefully that can help you, motivate you to get started.
Intensive care is no place to find out that there's no will. And you can't have a meaningful conversation with somebody when they're on a ventilator. So you need to figure out, we need to have those conversations well before those unexpected emergencies happen.
Before we continue, I have a quick question for our viewers. Are you enjoying the show so far? Well, then make sure to subscribe to TD Direct Investing's YouTube channel. And if there's a topic you'd like to learn more about, let us know in the comments. Plus, follow us on X at TD Direct Invest to get a sneak peek at upcoming shows and tons of other content designed to help build your investing knowledge. All right, David, thanks for helping us better understand the importance of estate planning. Of course, there's a lot that goes into creating an estate plan, more than we'll likely be able to cover here today. But that said, let's chat through 3 key steps to creating an estate plan. So the first one on your list is choosing an executor. So what makes a capable executor, in your opinion?
Someone that you trust, someone that you know that's going to follow exactly what your wishes are going to be, someone that you believe that's going to be organized, but they're going to be organized because they're also going to have the help of the team that you're going to put together. So, the lawyer, the accountant, the financial advisor. So you're making it easier for them. Again, the thought process might change if you decide to go with a bank or a trust company to be the executor. But the majority of people are, again, like I said, they're asking a family member or a friend to be the executor. And you know what? Have that conversation saying, I'm thinking about, I'm updating my will and, or I'm writing my will, and I'd like you to do this big favor for me to be my executor, and explain how you're going to make it easier on them. Because a lot of people take on the job. On average, it takes about 100 hours of an individual's time, anywhere from between 18 to 24 months to settle that estate. And during that time, you're asking somebody to deal with the tax department. You're asking somebody to have to deal with uncooperative beneficiaries who are only interested in getting paid, getting their check. So you need to also help the executor understand the dynamics of the family. Maybe the executor already knows what the dynamics of the family are, and that may also sway if they're going to take on the job. But if they want to take on that job, do that one big favor for them, you need to prepare them as best you can, because as one friend told me, it's the worst job in the world that anybody could have.
How far in advance should someone generally discuss executorship with their preferred candidate?
Well, if you're going to say, well, you know what, I'm either going to update my will or I'm going to write one and get the process going, you want to, have in mind a couple of candidates of who you'd like as the executor and have the conversation. I would, suggest maybe one or two people just in case the first choice predeceases you, that you've also got named in the will a second person that could be the executor. Not a big fan of co-executors because, if the two executors don't get along, that could slow down the process because nothing can be done until signatures are signed. But again, it would depend on the family dynamics and who's the individuals that you've chosen. If they get along, then, you might choose them and that way the co-executors can split the responsibilities of what needs to get done.
Well, you made me think of something here with the co-executor idea. Being a parent, we always say as parents, you never want to pick your favorite child, right? So that's you definitely, at least you don't want to let them know that you have a favorite. But some parents might like to avoid that uncomfortable situation of choosing one child over the other as their executor. Like, in your opinion, is it generally a good idea to name all your children as co-executors to make sure nobody's feelings are hurt?
It's not about feelings. I'm not a big fan of that. In my case, we were 3 executors. Look how that turned out. 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000. Where my parents fell down on this is that they didn't have the conversation with all of us. I knew what was in the will, and I always assumed, what is equal should be fair, but some parties didn't want to go along with that. So, my parents should have had the conversation with all of us and then said, okay, we're making one of you as the executor and here's our reasons, and move on from there. They didn't do that. You have to understand that it's not that you love one more than the other. It's just that when it comes to this important piece of, responsibility, you need to choose someone that you think is going to be organized and get things done. If you want to keep the peace in the family and choose everybody, then you're just looking for trouble. Getting organized and doing all of this is probably the greatest gift of love that you can do for your family. It's probably bigger than changing their diapers, because now you're now organizing and letting them know exactly what your wishes are, and you're making them more let them understand that what's important to you, is to keep the family together.
That's a great point, and we all want to do the best for our families and our kids. And I think you even said earlier there are other alternatives if you didn't want to name one of them as an executor. If you thought, depending on your situation, you could use a trustee or a lawyer or something like that. So that's good to know as well. So let's move on though, David, to your second key step. So your second key step on your list is organizing the relevant documents the executor would need to help settle the estate. So, of course, the will is the cornerstone of that documentation. What are some of the key questions they'll need to address as they draft their will?
Who are the beneficiaries? Are there specific assets that you want to leave? What percentages do you want to leave to the beneficiaries? Are there charities, your favorite charities that you want to leave a legacy to? So if you have young children, who would be the guardians? We spoke about what happens if you don't have a guardian, that how the government steps in. So who would you have the guardians, which means that you have to have another conversation with your spouse. Who are you going to choose as the guardian? The guardian may look after the kids, but what financial resources have you put in place so that that money will be there to take care of the kids if both of you aren't there. So all of those things you need to think about before you go see the lawyer, or they're going to ask those questions, but you need to be prepared to be asked those questions and to give it some thought going forward.
All right. I think I've heard you talk about as well. Like, is there other documentation such as, bank accounts, like where you'd want to know where those type of things are, or who your financial institutions are? Another one I've heard previously is, what about power of attorneys? Is that something that would be part of the estate plan in your mind?
Absolutely. You know what? You're only going to die once, but you're going to need a healthcare directives, because you might be may not be able to communicate on your own. You might need a power of attorney so that your assets can be, mortgage payments, other payments can be, and you need someone to look after them. So you need the will, you need the power of attorney, you need the healthcare directives, and you also need to give some thought to your digital assets. Now, we spend a lot of time being online, and for every one email address, there's at least 130 digital identities related to that email address. So that means, Facebook, YouTube, Amazon, your banking accounts. So if you haven't got given any thought to putting together where all those logins and passwords are kept, how is somebody going to get into a laptop, a cell phone? How are they going to a desktop computer if they don't know where the logins and passwords are? So you need to also have part of that package. And what I advocate is to have a brightly colored envelope and say, you know what, the executor or someone that is going to look after these things, if something was to happen to me, death, or I'm in the hospital or something like that, look for the bright red envelope in the filing cabinet. In there, you're going to find will, healthcare directives, power of attorney, passwords and logins, insurance policies, maybe investment statements, the name of the lawyer, accountant, all of those things in a brightly colored envelope. And the reason for that is that when an emergency like this comes up, people are traumatized. And you can't find things when things are traumatized. So make it easier on the individual, make it easier on your family.
Yeah, those are some really good tips there. And I know one of the other things that I can even add that is from my personal experience is my mother passed away before her parents, so my grandparents were still alive, and I had a grandmother that ended up getting Alzheimer's and being sick, and she didn't change before then, didn't change her power of attorneys to where my mother was the power of attorney. Since my mother was gone, there was no one that was there for power of attorney for her parents. So that ended up in a large court battle that I went through. So I have a similar experience there, but making sure you have those conversations or have like a backup power of attorney in place just in case something like that happens. I want to go back. I want to step back a little bit, David, on you said the digital footprint. I know a lot of people will be interested in that. That could perk my ears up a little bit. What are some of the best practices for sunsetting those accounts?
My friend Linda, she passed away 3 years ago from cancer. And I could tell that her executor, who was her husband, he didn't know what her digital assets, because recently I saw on Facebook her birthday came up, and then LinkedIn had a job anniversary pop up. So that right off the bat, that made me think he doesn't know where all her passwords are. So start the process. You know what? Let me write down all my logins and all passwords. There's a lot of also great online solutions where you can bank all of those in a vault and, make it available to the executor if they need them. In time need, it'll automatically open up. So those sort of things. Each social media company has its own protocol in terms of how to shut down the accounts. And, do you want to memorialize? Do you want to shut it down? So you have to understand or make it easier on the executor. Exactly what do you want done with your social media accounts? Then you've got the online banking. If you've got payments going through, there's not enough dollars, or the bank finds out that you've passed away, then everything's going to get stopped. They're going to freeze the accounts, but you still got those online banking payments going through. So you need to stop those.
Well, those are some good tips there. And it's something I never even thought of on that digital footprint. It's something I think we just are so used to that, that was a really good point. All right, the third key step on your list is deciding how to divide an estate's assets to beneficiaries. What are some of the common assets that need to be considered when creating an estate plan?
Well, you have to take in consideration if there's a home, is there a cottage, are there investments, insurance policies, all of those things you need to take in consideration. What percentage do you want to leave? But I think the biggest thing that you need to is to have a what if scenario of the estate plan when it comes to taxes. Sit down with a financial advisor, and do what if something was to happen? Is there a shortfall in terms of the estate having to pay taxes? You don't want all of the assets having to go to pay all the taxes for the estate. Is there a cottage? Is there going to be capital gains? That's why you may have to have a conversation with the accountant. Do some what if scenarios and know if you want to leave a certain amount of assets, a percentage of the assets, a dollar amount or percentage that you've taken consideration that the taxes are paid and that there's going to be dollars left over to pay the beneficiaries the amount that you hope to leave them as gifts.
All right. Well, you said a five-letter word, taxes, that none of us like to hear, and we never want to consider that word. But speaking of which, what are some of the best practices for distributing certain assets in a tax-efficient manner? Do you have any suggestions there?
You need to sit down with a professional and go through and say, okay, if something was to happen, I was to die, what assets, how can I shield the assets from taxes, and what do we need to do? And even if you have to work with an advisor or an accountant and spend a couple hours and spend a few $100s, those few $100s or $1,000, whatever the cost might be, is going to save your family not only the grief, but it's also going to save them hundreds, maybe even millions of dollars by you doing some effective estate planning and tax planning going forward.
Yeah, those are some really good points there because I know I've even working with TD Direct Investing and TD Bank, I've seen a lot of clients say, take that initiative to ask, hey, how can I most effectively do a beneficiary for a TFSA, like a tax-free savings account, or what should I do with my RSP account? So simply just asking those questions may take a bit more time, but it can be really valuable where you're not stuck with, just going to the estate or not going where you want it to go. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for walking us through the basics of estate planning and some of the key decisions that need to be made. Hopefully, this gives those in our audience without a plan the push that they need to get started. Now, before we wrap things up, let's reveal the answer to our trivia question. As a refresher, the question was, what percentage of Canadians have an estate plan according to a study by IG Wealth Management in April 2023? And the answer is just one quarter. So 25% have an estate plan that outlines how their financial assets should be distributed. Did you know that, David? I don't know if you knew that fact or we snuck that in on you. Any surprise there?
Really, Brian? You don't think I knew that fact? Absolutely. That's why I told you that's the problem that Canadians face today. And the big problem is that wealth transfer, that $1 trillion that's going to come over the next 10 years. If you don't have a plan, the government has a plan for you. So if you're comfortable with that, then I wish you all the best.
All right, David. Aside from that, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers?
We talked a lot about estate planning, but it's not only just about estate planning, it's about legacy planning. So you need to think about, again, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Who are you? What do you want to be remembered for? And it's important that if you're going to take the steps and everything that we've talked about here and start to make a move towards doing what's important with the estate plan, also the legacy plan, and having the conversations, do those things so that you leave a legacy, not a legacy and a mess.
Right. That makes sense. Well, thanks again for joining us, David. And for those in our audience, make sure to register for our upcoming live webinars and check out our library of on-demand content available in the Learning Center and on our YouTube page. See you all next time. Have more questions? Check out the links to the right and in the description below.